mentioned, there's been a bit of issues, technically speaking, and I'm really sorry to say that this means that we will not have available the subtitles as foreseen. So the whole session will be in English. I hope you can follow. It will be recorded as well, and of course, after this session, which is the presentation of the Local and Regional Agenda, Chapter 6, you will be able to also consult the publication that we've been preparing together with several experts. Most of them will be speaking today as well. Okay. I think I'm not leaving anything in terms of logistics. Well, yes, sorry. As you know, Zoom has a chat, and the idea of the webinar is that we do the whole presentation, but you can post your questions in the chat during the talk, and we will have some time at the end for questions to all speakers. So I encourage you to use the chat to ask any questions, doubts, things you want to ask our speakers. And we will be answering as many of them as possible at the end of the session. So welcome all, and I hope you enjoy this session. Because my colleague is trying to solve last-minute issues, I will be both your moderator and your introductor of the session. So, as mentioned, I'm talking here on behalf of the Local and Regional Time Network, from which my association, the Time Use Initiative, is part of. And we are very happy to present what is already the Chapter 6 of our Local and Regional Agenda, which is an ongoing project that we started a few years ago, where we try to compile and share all the good practices that are already implemented around the world on time policies. Because some of you do not know yet the network, let me start by quickly introducing what the network is and what we do. And for that, I will be sharing my screen briefly. Perfect. Okay. Let me put it big so that you can see everything. Okay. I hope you can see my screen. So the Local and Regional Time Network is the only network of cities, metropolis, and regions that promotes the implementation of time policies and the idea of the right to time. We created, the network was created a while ago already, and we are the only ones focusing on this topic. We have a model of free membership for the first 2 years, and then we are working towards a model that allows us to stay in the network and continue our work. During the next years. We have support and financing of European Union funds and current financing from several Catalan institutions. And with this, we do different activities. We are currently about 50 member institutions, including cities, metropolis, and regions. And we represent more or less 90 million inhabitants worldwide. As you can see by this map, we are mostly located in Europe and Latin America, with members across both continents. And we are hoping to, of course, enhance it to new regions and new countries as we go. What we do? We basically summarize it in these 4 points. We try to innovate. We try to imagine together what the right to time looks like in practice, what time policies could be, what are the opportunities we have to create innovative time policies. And we do that by basically building a community around it and engaging not only with the cities, metropolis, and regions that conform our network, but also with experts and researchers worldwide. We also try to support implementation because our success for us it's measured on how many cities and regions are implementing time policies. So we try to offer our members training, resources, methodologies that allow them to implement those time policies in practice in their reality, in their context. Of course, we're a network, so we create spaces where we can exchange and raise awareness. We have an annual assembly yearly, and we try to participate in key forums for public policy development. So not only, let's say, internal meetings like the annual assembly, but we try to be present in spaces where public policy is discussed at the local level. So, for example, at the Smart City Congress, to quote one. And of course, time policies and the right to time, it's not yet a concept that is well known. So it's key for the network to inspire others to raise awareness. To that end, one of the key things we manage is the World Capital of Time, which is an award we created in 2022. Barcelona City Council was the first city to be awarded with it. And the point of this award is that each year a city takes a bit, let's say, the representation of time policies worldwide and can create both citizen awareness towards their citizens, but also foster the network sustainability by basically letting other cities, other regions, other metropolis know what we are doing. And of course, each city during the year of their award usually promotes and consolidates already time policies they have. And here you have the cities that so far have been local and World Capital of Time, so Barcelona, Bolzano, Strasbourg, Bogota, and Sant Boi de Llobregat. So this is very quickly the network for those of you that didn't know the network so far. You can go to our website for more information. You can follow us on our social networks where we publish events like the one that reunites us today. Sorry.
Thank you, Ariadna. Now I can take over as moderator the presentation. And thank you all for your availability to change the platform. We are deeply sorry about this change. We just have some technical issues. In case you have some colleagues that also wanted to connect, please feel free to share with them the Zoom link that you will be finding in the invite option. As Ariana said at the beginning, and for those of you that are joining now, we are recording this session, so don't worry if you miss anything, especially in terms of language. Captions were thought to be provided, but currently with the change of platform that is not possible anymore. However, you have live captions only in English if you activate them in the more option just close to the share, react, chat, whatever you have in the audio section below the Zoom screen. So feel free to do that, and we hope you enjoy the webinar given the issues. And with that, we can continue the presentation. We have plenty of speakers today discussing chronocities and how they relate with sustainable futures in general. The first one of them being Diego Golom.
Mark, maybe,
yes.
Sorry, because I have to explain a bit the structure of the agenda, so maybe I'll finish that and you introduce Diego. Yeah. Okay. So just quickly, I will explain the structure of the agenda that we will have available soon and the structure of today. And then I hand over to Mark for a bit more for the presentation of the different speakers. So the agenda is called Chronocities for Sustainable Futures. And for us, it's a very innovative agenda because we feel that while time policies are getting traction worldwide, thanks partially to the work of the network, but also to the work of all our partners that have been working on it longer than that. And I see here Janif from Tempo Territorial as a key example of that. We also feel that time policies that specifically very clearly focus on circadian rhythms and chronobiology, more generally speaking, are not so common. So for us, this agenda has been an attempt to really put the focus there, to inspire others, to inspire a new generation of time policies that could take chronobiology teachings, chronobiology findings, and really put it at its core when they are designing those time policies. So this is a bit like the idea of the agenda, and we hope you find it interesting. What you will find there, it's basically three reflections done by three internationally recognized experts, most of which you will hear today, about how to build this type of policies. We talk about the concept of a chronosensitive city, a chronosensitive region or metropolis. So what does that mean? How it impacts people, how it impacts the public policy we can build from it. And then so this is a bit different from other agendas because the reflection part is a bit bigger because we felt that this topic is not so well known and needs a bit more introduction, let's say, that maybe other topics like work-life balance, where we all know instinctively what we are talking about. And then we explain some good practices on time policies related to chronocities and chronobiology, basically divided into areas. First, good practices related to regulation, urban planning, and legislative measures. And we will have today one of the persons that have implemented one of these practices in practice. It was a bit redundant, sorry. And a second part of good practices around awareness, social habits, data, because to implement those type of policies, we first need to raise this awareness, right? So this is also a very important part of this issue. So basically today we will follow a similar idea than the one in the agenda. We will start by reflecting a bit what is a chronocity, what we can understand as chronocity. And then we will have a roundtable of three key experts that will try to reflect from their different points of view. What does it mean? What is the impact of designing this type of policies and so on? And we will finish up with the explanation of a good practice, which we're very happy to have, and how to implement, right, chronocity in practice. And then, as mentioned, we will have a final part of questions from the audience. So again, please feel free to use the chat for that throughout the event, and we will compile all the questions afterwards. So that's all for me, Mark. Now, yes, I hand it over to you. Thank you, Mark.
Yes, Ariana, I'm sorry for cutting you. Thank you all, and thank you all also the ones that have joined. Just repeating again, just in case that everyone understands it, and maybe I will also say it in English. You can see captions in the More button, but only in English. Ahora en español podéis, debido al cambio de plataforma, podéis encontrar los subtítulos si le dais al botón de más, mostrar subtítulos o show captions, eh, pero solo en inglés por cómo está configurado Zoom. Y con esto ya, and now we are actually continuing again. Thank you for your patience. As I was saying, we have a nice round table of speakers, and beginning with a keynote speech by Diego Golombe. He's professor at the Department of Life and Behavioral Science from the University of San Andres and senior advisor of the Argentinian National Research Council and UNESCO Chair for the Interdisciplinary Study of Time. So, Diego, we are happy to have you here. Feel free to have the floor. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, no, I could make it. Can you hear me properly?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll go fast since we are running a bit late. And I'll share my screen and of course start by not only thanking but congratulating you for organizing this meeting. I think it's really important, and we are. I think it's coming of age. The idea of a time city, chronocity, or circadian city, which is what I want to tell you about. What's the problem here? That usually, when you think about urban studies or cities or whatever, we tend to think about our cities and ourselves in space, but we actually live in time. Not only ourselves, our circadian rhythms, but also our urban landscapes and our cities. But of course, if you talk about this to anybody, they won't have a clue about what we are talking about. And let me give you an example about this. If you go and look for a book on circadian rhythms, on chronobiology, in a bookstore in Argentina, here's a good book, old one by Alain Renberg, a very old chronobiologist. But take a look at where this book is. Who are our neighbors here? Well, it's aloe vera, miraculous plant, predictive astrology, Ernesto Che Guevara, very well-known chronobiologist, of course. And this one here, I don't know if you can see this one, the big book of cooking, right? So that's where people think that the time-related research is located. So how do we go from there to public policy, right? Of course, the first thing we have to think about is individuals. We all have body rhythms, circadian rhythms in everything, right? From physiology to behavior to mood to decision making and so forth. That's very well known. So that will be my starting point, that we all, as individuals, have circadian rhythms, have biological rhythms, one of which is, of course, sleep, probably the best known one. And we've coined this idea that we do have a sleep capital as individuals and society, right? It's capital. So it's something that you can rely on and you can invest on. So what we've been trying to do in the past few years is to understand the equations for this sleep capital. What brings you more sleep capital, what makes you lose it, and so forth, both in individual and social aspects, right? Because we know that if we don't invest in that seed capital, you'll get lots of problems, like somnolence, of course, mood changes, teamwork related to mood, health, of course, accidents, productivity, and economic effects. It's been calculated that problems related to sleep cost nations from 1 to 3% of GDP, which is a lot of money. We did a calculation of that for Argentina, and we arrived at the figure of 1.3% of the GDP of sleep-related problems, which is really a lot of money, and we should start making campaigns for turning this down, probably. What's the problem here, both for individuals and society? Data. Where do we get the data for defining a chronocity, a circadian city? How do we get the data for social aspects of chronobiology? Of course, we have lots of surveys, right? Many countries have time use surveys that most of you know quite well. In some national health surveys, there are time-related questions or sleep questions and so forth. But usually, in many countries, not most, in many countries, for sure in my country and in Latin America, we cannot rely on surveys because they're not accurate, or they are not continuous, or they're not happening every few years and so forth. So one idea that I would like to put forward is that we might look for proxies of the circadian city, for proxies of this chronocity, which is measuring things that are out there, and data is out there for sure. And from there to derive how is the city moving in time. For example, we can look at social networks. And we've been looking at social networks in Argentina. It has been done in Europe. It has been done in the US. And it's perfect, really. You can rely on Twitter, on Instagram, on TikTok, and have an idea of how a society is behaving in time. You can even derive social jet lag from this, which is the difference between circadian rhythms in weekdays and weekends. So it's a very good proxy of activity for a society. Of course, you can also look at transportation data. In most of our cities, we do have transportation cards or some kind of system that automatically gathers data for people. And again, this is a very good proxy of social activity in time. And again, you can compare weekdays, weekends, and so forth. And the final example of proxies is looking at cell phones, at smartphones. Um, and we are really amazed at the data that we found. We've been looking at Android data throughout a 1 minute or even seconds epochs, and it's as good as doing actimetry, right? It's as good for measuring circadian rhythms for individuals and eventually for societies as if you were measuring actimetry or even polysomnography. So this is scary, but it's a very good proxy of activity. The first thing people do when they wake up is they turn on to their cell phones. The last thing they do before they go to sleep, they look at their cell phones. So it's a very good measure, although it's not the one we would like to choose, but it's a very good measure of activity for individuals and for the city. Okay, so how do we go now to societies? And I'm running fast. I hope we have time for discussion or questions at the end so we can make up for the time that we lost because of technical problems. How do we go to societies? And I'd like to pose 5 questions for challenges for chronocities, for circadian cities. Some may seem obvious, but I hope to convince you that they're not. First challenge, what time is it? Seems to be a very straightforward question. Well, it's not. We can say what time it is according to our wristwatch or to our alarm clock. We can ask what time is it according to our body clock, our circadian clock, and we can ask what time is it according to the sun, the geographical time. They should be the same, right? Well, they are not. They're usually quite desynchronized among themselves because of different things that we have been doing for the past decades or in some times centuries. For example, time zones, which should be very clearly delimited by the 24 time zones out of GMT0, are not. If you take a look at the map of time zones, it's not a good map. I mean, it changes, crosses every time according to policies, according to what a nation wants, to what a governor wants, and it changes every few years and so forth. And also, and this is a very important question for chronocities, DST, which is something that in Europe we've been discussing quite a lot. In the US, it's been discussed. And according to chronobiology, it's completely nonsense to have DST because we don't save energy at all. And it does have effect on health. It does have an effect on accident rates and so forth. So first question for a chronicity is to define the right time for the city or for the nation. Second question, light, which is very related to the other one, right? It's very related to what time it is. Uh, and light can be considered in its 2 forms. One is light during the day, which very recently we found that it's really important for sleeping at night. We didn't know that. We didn't know that being exposed to natural light during the day is one of the most important factors for sleep hygiene, for sleeping well. So we do need to get exposed to light during the day. That means we need to change architecture. We need to change the ways we think about public spaces so that more people can be exposed to diurnal light. But we also have to think about light during the night, which is called nocturnal light contamination or light pollution. And it happens in most big cities and for sure small cities as well. We've been studying native groups in the north of Argentina which had no access to electric light, and now they have. And so far, in about 10 years, they have lost 1 hour of nocturnal sleep, right? So if you're looking out of a building, of a tall building, and you can see the city lights, something is wrong because those lights should be pointing downwards, not upwards, right? So there's a lot that we have to legislate and regulate regarding night light. Of course, we do need light because of security reasons and many other reasons, But you might know that there's a famous quote by Thomas Edison that he said that he was inventing electric light to fight against the tyranny of sleep. Well, sleep is not a tyranny, it's a necessity. Third one, third talent for circadian cities, chronocities, health, circadian hospitals. At what time do we do things in hospitals, in health clinics, and so forth? What happens with illumination in the clinic? If you've been close to an ICU, right, you'll notice that there are no nights and days because light is always on. Well, there's some evidence that if you just turn off the light at night in the ICU and the NICU and the neonatal ICU, people will get discharged significantly faster. Okay, what happens with medical shifts? A few years ago, it was quite common that first-year resident medical doctors would have a night shift and then they would continue working during the day. So that would allow a 32-hour day for doctors. I would not like to get treated by that doctor who has been working for 30 plus hours. So we do need to regulate this better. And of course, health itself. Okay? At what time do we issue or do we administer drugs? At what time do we do diagnostic tests and so forth, which is called chronotherapy, chronopharmacology, and so forth. This is coming of age. There is a lot of recent evidence on circadian medicine, circadian chronobiology, and I'm happy to talk about that because it's one of the areas of my lab, actually. Fourth talent, school timing. And this is very famous because we do know that teens, that adolescents are owls. I mean, the phase of their circadian clock is phase delayed. They like to do everything late at night, and of course, there's also a cultural pleasure to do things late at night. What's the problem? That the following day, high school, secondary school starts very early. Okay, usually it starts between 7:30 and 8 in most countries, and during winter it's dark out there, the school is not very well illuminated, they might start with very hard topics like math or calculation and so forth, and they're asleep. They're technically asleep. So again, we need to find evidence to inform public policy regarding school timing. It's something that we are doing in our country, and it's been done in Germany, it's been done in the US, and in a few other countries that they decided to start high school a little bit later and to accommodate transportation and other schedules. And the result was really extraordinary. Final talent. So this is one of our papers. Final talent here is work timing, right? You know that there are many kinds of regulations for work timing. Specifically, it's being discussed right now mostly in Europe about the 4-day week and how many hours we need to work. But again, we cannot get rid of nocturnal work and of shift work because there are many kinds of work that cannot stop during the night. So, okay, it has to be done. How do we do it? How do we cope with fatigue? How do we cope with food during the night? How do we cope with light in the workspace? So this is a big challenge for a city, both public places, public offices, and of course, industries and private offices. We are also working on this, so I'd love to share some of our experience. And I know that several of you have been working on this, including the speakers. So in summary, we need to define and measure rhythms, including sleep capital. For that, we need to get good data because the only way to inform public policy is with real solid data and real solid evidence. We need to find about the sleep cost that I told you. It's a very good argument for governments to tell them that they're losing a lot of money if they do not consider time in the regulation of their city. And we need to inform public policies. That's our role as scientists. We need to do science, we need to understand the world, but also to inform public policy. So we do need a right to time. This is something that the Time Use Initiative has been working on for a very long time. What we as scientists need to do is to provide them with data and with evidence because time waits for no one and no city can get rid of time. Thank you.
Thank you, Diego, for this great presentation. We are noting that there are already some questions. We are collecting all of them to the end of the session. So feel free to keep sending them. And now we would be more than happy to begin with a roundtable of different speakers. The roundtable will be formed by Camila Green, Dr. Camila Green, founder of Super Navigators and V Society, Dr. Scott Bremer, researcher at the Center for the Study of Sciences and the Humanities of the University of Bergen, and Dr. María Fernanda Cerón Rugerio, lecturer and researcher at the Precision Nutrition and Chrononutrition Group at the University of Barcelona. So all of them, thank you for being here. I have some questions for all of you. So let's begin with Camila. Camila, how can chrono leadership help us create healthier and more productive rhythms in work and life in a chronicity?
And thank you so much for your question. And I've just shared a presentation. I know I have 10 minutes also to go into how we can implement chronobiology in organizations. I have a background in engineering, a PhD in work-life balance. I've been working with applied chronobiology in 17 countries, primarily pharmaceutical and medtech. I'm also the author of 6 books. My latest book is called Chrono Leadership. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. Also this year on the Thinkers 50 radar list. It is a global list. Thinkers 50 is called the Oscars of Management Thinkers. And with Chrono Leadership, I'm one of 30 global leaders which they think will form the management thinking of the future. My beginning with chronobiology started when I did my PhD back in 2003, where I read this scientific article about chronobiology, and it gave me an insight into my own biological rhythm. I've never been a morning person. I'm more an afternoon and evening person, so I changed my working hours. I've never been employed. I've had my own company for 21 years, and I really try to work in sync with my circadian rhythm. So chrono leadership, what is it about? And chronocities, when we talk about leadership. The thing is, we have designed time for machines, and now it's time to redesign it for minds. And what does it mean in a chrono city? Just in my lifetime, we have seen this transition in a company's value from going from 80% tangible values. It's buildings and machines in the industrial society, collective work design, and people have to adapt to the industrial time system. But here in today's society, 90% of companies' value is intangible. It's human beings creating the value, and therefore it also makes sense to adapt time rhythms and structures to people. That is chrono leadership in a chrono city. Till Rønneberg, professor in chronobiology, and his research team in Munich has calculated more than 300,000 people's chronotypes. And here you see the distribution by the Munich chronotype questionnaire. And you can say there is around 30% early chronotypes, 30% in the middle, and 40% late chronotypes or late risers. The thing is that 80% of the population are woken up by an alarm clock here in Europe, in US and Asia. And when you're living out of sync with your biological clock, Russell Foster and team have also showed that every time you get interrupted or interrupt your sleep, it's direct linked to some of the health problems like diabetes, cancer, mental illness, and so on. So why are so many people living out of sync with their biology? And this is a part also that we have to unlock a lot of our thinking from the agrarian society and the industrial society, because we have learned to be those disciples of the clock and learn to adapt to this one time system, the working 9 to 5 and check in and check out and sell your hours. And it started with the mechanical clock was invented around 1283. It was the monk, it was the religion who took this mechanical clock, and when the bell was ringing, they were eating. When the bell was ringing, they were going to work or praying and sleeping and so on. And we see that this tower builds is coming into our cities 100 years after invention of the mechanical clock. Here you have a German city just 100 years after the invention of the mechanical clock. In one generation, people in Cologne went from never quite knowing what time it was to this clock dictating, ding-a-ling, now you're going to work, ding-a-ling, eat lunch, ding-a-ling, you're going home again. So the clock time won over our natural time. And it's been very efficient in the industrial time system because the man behind the first management theory in the world, Friedrich Winslow Taylor, and his principle of scientific management in 1911, he said, in the past, the man has been first. In the future, the system must be first. And he invented techniques for streaming mass production. And here you see a 4T. Before implementing scientific management, it took 12 and a half hours. After implementing that people should fit into a system, it took 93 minutes. So it's been fantastic for our industrial time system, but it's not fantastic when 90% of a company's value in today's society is intangible and human beings are creating the value. That's why we need chrono leadership. We need to adapt time structures and rhythms to people. So how can we unlearn some of the cultures of the past? We have a lot of thinking from the agrarian society. The good person is one who gets up early and gets something out of the day. We have those moral sayings all over the planet. The early bird catches the worm. In France and in Spain, you say if you get up early, God will come and give you a helping hand. There's no God if you sit and work very hard in the evening and you are a late chronotype. And we have a lot of early riser propaganda on this planet Earth here. Meetings are set for 8 a.m. Successful leaders are praised for waking up at 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. And a lot of companies have focus times. It should be in the morning. But it comes with a price to fake an early rise when most of the population are late risers, late chronotypes. So we have this early riser propaganda with the 5 a.m. club, the miracle morning, and so on. So here in the end, I will come with 5 tools that you can implement in your organization or your work, the Chrono Leadership Toolkit. First, you have to know your chronotype, you have to know your energy animal, you have to design your workday in sync with circadian rhythm. You're born with a circadian rhythm, it's not something you choose. Map the team rhythm, find out when you should place meetings, and audit early riser bias in organization. Research shows that just by showing up early at a workplace, you are perceived as much more committed than if you are starting later and actually working in sync with your circadian rhythm. So test your chronotype, the morningness, eveningness questionnaire. It's 19 questions. You can actually also take a gene test with bodyclock.health in Germany. That's the first link. Then draw your energy animal. So what time of the day do you have most energy? Some people are dromedary, they peak 1 time a day. Other people peak twice. And then you can be an early dromedary or late dromedary or early camel or late. But place the most complex task at times where you have most energy. And almost all leadership books in the world says that you should start with the most complex task. And that's not true. If you are a late chronotype, if you are a late riser, you should do the most complex task in the afternoon or evening. I have been writing 3 or 6 articles for Fast Company. And here you have an article about the best work design for a morning person. Do the most complex task in the morning and have a calm evening. If you are a night owl, if you are a late chronotype, have a calm morning. It will be ideal if you could wake up without an alarm clock and do the most complex work in the afternoon and evening. Map the team's rhythm. I have working with teams where they're active 22 hours out of 24 hours. If you can place meetings where all of you have the best energy, that's the best. And then have focus time for early chronotypes in the morning and late chronotypes in the afternoon and evening. Research shows that if you're an early chronotype, you are most creative in the morning. If you are a late chronotype, you're most creative in the evening. Audit early riser bias in the organization here in the end. Meetings, are they always scheduled early? That's an early riser bias. Performance, as I said before, just by showing up early, you are perceived as more committed than if you are starting later. But in a knowledge society, it makes sense that we are creating organizations supporting our diversity in chronotypes because it's a part of evolution. Researchers believe that the reason why some people are getting up early and go to bed early, and some people are going to bed later and get up later, is because of evolution. When we were living outside, it's been great that we have this chronodiversity in our population. And the last thing with rich rhythms are rewarded and rich are quietly punished. So we need to create, because the problem is our society favors early risers, our organizations favor early risers, and we need to create workplaces and school system also supporting our diversity in chronotypes. I've been working for later starting times in schools also for the last 20 years. I founded the organization Bee Society 20 years ago. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, and I look forward to this discussion today.
Thank you, Camila. Thank you so much. We have shared the link that you just showed, the QR on the chrono test in the chat of this session, in case anyone wants to access it. Now we can go to the next speaker, Scott. I have also a question for you. How could Chronocity be related to impacts and improve sustainability and environment now that we are speaking not only about health, but beyond that? So feel free to take over.
Thank you, Mark. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Scott Bremer. I'm a research professor at the University of Bergen in Norway and at Norse Research. And my research is largely been around climate adaptation and how we adapt to the changing timings and temporalities around us. But my background's actually in urban planning. That was my first career. So this is a really poignant and really interesting and fun discussion to be part of. I start with a picture of my chronocity. This is Bergen. Bergen is the wettest city in Europe. So the other night it was sunny, so I had to run out and take a photo from my balcony. And what's particular about the city of Bergen is that it's, as you can see, it's very keyed into different natural rhythms. It's very determined by the light. I saw a question in the chat actually about northern cities. And now we are in the lightest period of the year, and the sun will never go down. There is always a slight blue tinge to the sky. It's also statistically the period of the year when we have the driest weather, and therefore it's also an explosion of social rhythms. This is the period of the year in Bergen when we have all of our concerts, all of the school festivals, all of the kind of any social activity you have with neighbors is all crammed into this 2 week period. So I think I wanted to just start by reflecting on the fact that those natural rhythms, those environmental rhythms that our cities are nested in, they have an impact on the social rhythms of a city and when things happen. And when I wanted to talk about sustainability, Mark, I was thinking we could talk about sustainability in terms of, for example, a 15-minute city and how that would reduce greenhouse gas emissions, for example. But I have rather been thinking about this in terms of paying in a relational sense. And by that I mean paying attention to all of the different timings in the city and how they relate to each other. And of course, how we can adapt to those. So the first point I wanted to make uh, 3 quick points, really. The first point is that there are multiple time worlds in a city. And that really builds on what Camilla was just saying, that people have different rhythms, different circadian rhythms, or indeed different work rhythms, as Diego was saying. And this apartment block really sums that up for me, that some people are sitting down to dinner, other people haven't got home from work yet, maybe some people are catching up on sleep and they're about to leave for work. So I want to talk about time worlds as different spheres of time experience or modes of living in time, different frameworks and tools that people do, and different practices, how we time our activities in a day. And I mean, we can think about different time worlds associated with, for example, professions that focus on task time. For example, a plumber or a builder who, they will start the next task when when they're finished with the first task. When will that be? Well, I'll do it when I'm done with the first task. Compare that to many of us, for example, working in offices who have our day cut up into meetings and kind of pre-planned timings, or compare that to, for example, the gardener in the city who syncs their work to different environmental rhythms. And when is it raining? Well, I can't cut the grass in the rain. So they will sync to different environmental signals. So people have very different time worlds that they move through. And of course, we time travel. And by that, I mean we move through different times. I have lots of kids at home, and the mornings are very hectic getting them off to school. And then I come to work, and it's a different timing. It's set to meetings online and so on. And then afterwards, I might participate in some gardening activities with my local gardens, and then it's a different timing again. And sustainability requires that we take into account all of these different time worlds so that we're not kind of acting according to for example, one type of government timing at the expense of other timings that we should take into account. And it means also taking account of the timings of the natural world. I could use the example of opening up a piped waterway. That is something that we're doing in Bergen now. It future-proofs our stormwater systems against, climatic change and so on. But of course, that implies a whole host of different timings. When do we maintain, if we open a waterway, and so it was a pipe and now it's a small river with a grassy bank and maybe a path. When do we maintain that waterway and the path? When do users use that path? Do we need lighting for security reasons, as Diego was saying? What about clashes with other users of that waterway? We have ducks or other animals, and there was a fantastic work done by Miriam Jensen in Denmark, where she looked at these clashes between humans and other river users like swans, and there would be swans attacking people when they're trying to nest while people are walking past. So that's the first thing. There are multiple time worlds. We need to pay attention to them. The second point is that these time worlds are in change. They're constantly changing. They're changing around us, and we are changing them. We are changing our timings every day. This is a photo of Paris's périphérique, the road that goes around Paris. And I put this here because I was staying there in December last year, and my hotel was basically where this photo was taken. It was right on top of this périphérique. And I kind of tried to sleep the night, and I kept being woken up every night and going to my window at 2, 3, 5 in the morning. And there was a constant stream of cars on this périphérique. And it really brought home to me how, systems of globalization, migration, global value chains, and altered relations to the environment are changing the patterns and the timings of use of a city and of the resources and infrastructures around us. So, and of course, it changes how we experience the city. Diego was talking about lack of sleep, and I can say I didn't sleep very much when I was sleeping above the périphérique. So this is a really important thing to take into account, how our time worlds are changing and how we adapt to them. We need systems or tools for tracking how our time worlds are changing and how we can adapt to them. There's this piece of work I often reference by Penn and colleagues in the city of Bristol in Alaska. And they looked at how changes in the flows of people coming into that city with migrant labor, changes in the environment with changing rainfall patterns, and changes in the environment relative to hunting season. So the moose hunting season was putting different stresses on the water system, the stormwater system, the water supply system. Suddenly there were more people coming in a pulse. There was rainfall was kind of putting a pulse of water through the stormwater system, and all of the people working in the municipality in charge of the water systems were all on holiday at the same time because it was moose hunting season. So it was about a little bit like what Camilla was talking about now. It's about mapping those different rhythms when they create this perfect storm scenario and how we can avoid them. And yeah, the third main point I wanted to bring up was this kind of tension between, okay, we have all these time worlds, they're all changing and they're going and pulling in multiple different directions. But at the end of the day, we do need to coordinate those. if everyone's living by their own timing, there are problems with that too. Nothing, no one would catch the bus on time, or no one would be at work at the right time. Everyone would miss their meetings if we weren't having something like a clock to orient ourselves around. We need these common reference points that can kind of bridge these time worlds. I live according to my timing, Mark lives according to his, but we can find a common reference point to make sure that we are meeting at the same moment, so that we can accomplish something together. One of those, actually, Diego's already talked about school timing, and a lot of people talk about school time as one of those timing frameworks that really set a rhythm to life in a city, in the sense that, the work day is often structured around the school day, and I know that is here in Bergen, for example. But of course, this coordination can also subjugate people, whose time counts, and also it can be rather unsustainable. So it results in electricity use. Pulses of electricity use in the mornings and the evenings, for example, when everyone has to stand up, make breakfast, put the washing machine on, put the dishwasher on, and this is really unsustainable. We have traffic jams, and we also have holidays. I know in Norway here, now we're coming to summer, everyone will try and find summer because they feel like we don't get a warm enough summer up here. So they'll travel to the south of Europe and fly there, and that's a very unsustainable rhythm. So as much as it's important to have coordinating rhythms, it's also important to disrupt certain unsustainable temporal patterns of use of a city or of things. The last point I just wanted to say is that we're now starting to work with the Time Use Initiative, and I just want to signal that we're really excited about. We're trying to work on this concept of chief time officers in municipalities, and we had a workshop on this last week where we came up with different principles of what a chief time officer, what that job might entail, what kind of characteristics a person in that role might have, and I hope to present that at the Time Use Week in October. So that's just a kind of a bit of a flag to that work that's coming up. So thank you.
Thank you, Scott, for all the presentation and these interesting points. And now we have the third point, the third member of the roundtable, Fernanda. I have also a last question for you. How can an educational system be designed to respect circadian rhythms and chronobiology? What are the benefits towards students, and how can cities implement them now that we are going beyond health, sustainability, business development? Now let's look at education. Whenever you prefer.
Now, now I can speak. I'm sorry, I was muted. Well, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm pleased to share this floor with like such respected colleagues. I'm going to try to answer the last question, just kind of recapitulating everything that my colleagues said in these previous talks. So as we are talking today, we are talking about how we live time and we live life basically within clocks. And this is really important because, I mean, these rhythms that the sun clock generates every day, these light and dark cycles actually have been really important for our biological clock and our circadian system in such a way that, as we've been learning today, when there's light, we are prepared to handle food and nutrients, to be awake, and to think. And this is really important to consider when we talk about the educational system. And what happens when there's darkness? Well, when there's darkness, we all know we are prepared to sleep, we are prepared to fast. But also it is important to know that during sleep, the brain consolidates memory. It consolidates also everything we learned during the day, which is more important for children and adolescents, people in the university, because it would also allow them to take advantage of everything they learn during the day. And a third clock, which is also important to consider, is the social clock, which I mean, we've heard within this hour that this social clock, this local time, is also really important because it can either go before, and it can go and help us to align with the sound clock and the biological clock, but it could also help us, but it could also go the other way around. That is, it could also disrupt our circadian rhythms. And this is, we've been talking about school start schedules, and this is something we need to consider, especially in our community in Catalonia, because it's great that other parts of the world are considering it, but other countries should also be aware of that. Why? Because this organization between the sound clock, the biological clock, and the social clock is really important to sustain a healthy temporal organization and healthy daily routines in such a way that when there's daytime, we need to be awake, we need to eat, and for example, at night, I was saying we need to sleep and fast. So one thing we are doing actually right, talking about the educational system, is that classes are in the morning, for example. And this is great because what we know through chronobiology is that during daytime, especially the first part of the morning, we do have higher cognitive performance. So this is one thing the educational system needs to like kind of keep on going, especially when talking about children and adolescents, because it's kind of the right time to study. But there's also another thing that we need to consider when we talk about school start schedules, which is chronotype. Chronotype is a characteristic that we all have that defines our individual preference for a particular time of day. So we've been talking about today how we have morning types. In the case, for example, of children and adolescents, especially toddlers and school-age children in the first year, they tend to be more morning type. Morning types are known as larks. They actually are well entrained with light. So they prefer to wake up early. The children wake up early in the first years of their life. And then actually, because if they wake up early, they need to go to sleep early as well, in synchrony with the rhythms of the sun clock. But we also have another kind of chronotype. We've been talking about evening chronotypes. People with evening chronotypes are also known as owls. And in this case, I would like to say that individuals with this evening type tend to be less synchronized with the sun clock. As you can see in the screen, evening type individuals would prefer to wake up later. And because they wake up later, they go to bed later. It is important to know that it's not that you're an evening type that you're going to sleep less. But what is important to know about evening chronotype and regarding the educational system is that chronotype is actually known as a marker of the end of adolescence. As you can see in the screen, when we are around 10 to 20 years old, we tend to be more evening oriented. But the interesting thing is, for example, in our region in Catalonia, is that these are the citizens that actually go to school earlier. So this is one thing we need to think about, because these evening-oriented prepubertal children and adolescents as well, or young adults, they are actually sleeping less. So these are students that they need to sleep less, they need to use the alarm clock, because they need to actually align their sleep schedules, not with their biological needs, but they need to align these sleep schedules with school times. So what is the problem with this sleep restriction? I was telling at the beginning that sleep is really, really important also for memory consolidation, and we need to remember this. And it's also important to consider in the context of young people, and all of us, that we are actually exposed to artificial light at night, screen timing, and all of this also works against our biological clock, because every time we end up sleeping less. And this is something that we need to consider because, for example, eveningness or late bedtimes in school-age children are actually associated with more daytime sleepiness. And more daytime sleepiness is also associated with alterations in behavior, in mood, and in performance in school-age children. So we do need to think about our routines and our schedules in order to also take advantage of everything we learn in school. Also, evening-oriented school-age children tend to be more exposed to artificial light at night. I mean, we are not inventing anything. If they stay late at night, they are going to be more exposed to light. The thing is that if they are more exposed to artificial light at night, they have less sleep duration and they have less day-night contrast. But we need to remember that our biological clock is actually trained to light. So we do need to think about our routines and the routines of school-age children in such a way that they actually match this physiology. And another thing and another concept to consider is that people and children that are more evening oriented, they have more social jet lag. So social jet lag is a concept that actually describes the difference in sleep timing on weekends and weekdays. So what happens on weekdays? Independent of the time that you have to go to bed, or that you actually went to bed, you have to wake up at a certain time because you need to get, and in the case of young adults, adolescents, they need to get up, they need to get to school at a certain time. So what happens during weekends? Well, during weekends, they decide to sleep more, and this changes in schedules is that we know as social jet lag. But the important thing to remember about social jet lag is that it is actually driven by sleep depth. What is a sleep depth? Okay, if every day you have to wake up at a certain time with an alarm clock, that is, you're not getting enough sleep. So Monday through Friday, you accumulate this need for sleep. It's like every time, like, we accumulate a little bit of sleep need. And what happens to us on weekends is that we say, okay, I'm going to sleep more today because I need to recover. I need to feel less tired. But what is important to know about this social jet lag is that if we sleep more, we're probably gonna feel less tired, but the negative consequences of short sleep durations cannot be recovered by catch-up sleep. And that is a concept that we always need to think about. It's like we can feel less tired, but everything else that, for example, a school-age children or an adolescent lost from knowledge or anything because they were sleeping during the day, they can't recover. So in adolescents as well, daytime sleepiness is, they know that eveningness is associated with greater daytime sleepiness. In adolescents, it's also associated with mood and sleep quality, worse mood and sleep quality. And also we know that physical activity levels tend to be lower in adolescents and with an evening-oriented chronotype. Even here at the University of Barcelona, we know that evening-oriented and greater social jet lag in these young populations is associated with lower adherence to the Mediterranean diet, etc. So we are really seeing that this mismatch between sleep timing and short sleep duration does has an impact on this young population, and a population that we usually think they're healthy. So we usually don't study them because they are apparently healthy. So in response to all this knowledge, a while ago, the American Academy of Pediatrics urged schools to optimize student sleep and seek start times that allow the students the opportunity to achieve optimal sleep levels. So it's interesting because this recommendation it's from 2014. Fortunately, we have recent evidence. Dr. Gollenberg also gave some perspective on this thing. Countries who have delayed school times, especially in school-age children in secondary school or in high school, they have found that this delay in school start schedules are related with lower daytime sleepiness, more punctuality, greater sleep duration, and a lower sleep depth. So without a doubt, it has also had an impact on cognitive function. So to answer the question that Mark made at the beginning of my intervention, the proposal would be delaying school start by 1 hour, helping adolescents to align their biological clocks with school start schedules. And in the context of Catalonia, I think we also need to think about how we are going to manage extracurricular activities. But because in Catalonia, extracurricular activities end up really late. They end up kind of at 11 p.m. So that's also another lifestyle factor that delays and shortens sleep. So we do need to think about everything. So thank you very much, and I'll be glad to answer your questions.
Thank you, Fernanda. Thank you for this amazing presentation as well, and the proposals. They are noted. And now we will have a specific point of view on a good practice. We have chosen to highlight the good practice of Bad Kissingen, a city town in Germany, and we have with us Michael Biden. He was the initiator and manager on chrono-urbanism in the original project on Chronocities in that city, and now he's also working on the issue anywhere else, but I will leave him to introduce himself. And I had prepared some some questions, but feel free, Michael, since we're running a bit out of time, to take the floor yourself and go ahead with the presentation.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Thank you for your invitation. And first of all, thank you also at Camilla and Dietrich Henkel, at Camilla Kring and Dietrich Henkel for mentioning me that leads to this invitation to this event. Thank you a lot of that. Before, I don't want to tell much about my person. If you want to read more about my person, you can read it on the website, because we are running out of time. And so I think I just want to start with I hope you can see this. I want to start talking about Bad Kissingen, but not only talking about Bad Kissingen, but also talking about 2 projects that were the outcome of the project of Bad Kissingen. First of all, you see this is a picture of me in 2003 in my first workshop at an INQA event. And this was, let's say, the first idea. There was the first idea born about the Chronocity when I was there. First, you have to know some things about the Chronocity of Bad Kissingen. I searched for a Chronocity partner for 3 years before we started there. And then I met the mayor of Bad Kissingen. And I was there because I'm not a scientist, I'm an economist. And we started a contract with as an economic development agent, and the project is from 2012 to 2016. In 2013, 2012, nobody knew about chronobiology. We had small scientific evidence. We had no RNA chronotype test. But Kissingen itself was an old-fashioned spa town. Think about that. I don't say anything further to that. We had a Chronocity. The budget was around 10,000 euros a year plus my fee. Chronocity project was 60 to 30% of my contract, 30 to 40% of my contract was to work as a business development officer. And one thing I want to add, I just added it to this to this slide, is that the span between the earliest and the latest chronotype in our clinical projects, we had some clinical projects, was 30.5 hours. So from the earliest to the latest is 30.5 hours. That leads to projects where we optimized shift schedules according to chronotypes. We call that liquid shifts. So I just want to present one result out of a project. It's called Chronoclinic in Wartenberg-Erding. It is not Bad Kissingen, but Bad Kissingen was the source of this project. So here you see some results, and we used the RNA chronotype test of body clock with 153 persons. And the positive effect was around 2,000 to 6,000 euros per employee per year. When you put this all together, you can read more about these projects at chronoworking.de. Okay, I will come to further outcomes of Chronocity project at the end of my presentation. First, I want to talk something about projects. We heard a lot of what to do, what we can do. I implemented it, Chronocity, within 4 years, and this is the outcomes, my recommendations if other cities would like to think about something like this. First, when you try to implement a Chronocity, it is not a project. Don't start it as a project. Start it as a strategic evolution. Because what's the difference? A project has a beginning, has a process, has an ending, has a report. Chronocity does not have an ending. So it is a complete different thinking when you think about implementing in something like this in a city. And that's why I prefer to call it a strategic evolution. The main enemy of this strategic evolution and of a project is the legislative term. So, for example, in Spain, in Dominican Republic, where I live currently, we have 4 years, and Germany has 6 to 8 years. And I experienced that one friction in the process of implementing Chronocity was this end of a legislation term. The next legislation term leads always to problems. Maybe you know that. And that's why I think don't call it as a project, call it a strategic evolution. I will come to that further on. Many people, the second thing is many people talk about time. We heard a lot about time. I say don't talk about times in the first place, because when we talk about chronobiology, we talk about rhythms. Nature doesn't know time. Nature doesn't know seconds, minutes, or hours. Nature only knows rhythms. And I also tell you why. This is a picture that shows the dealing the humans have to deal with in a town. When you see the humans just between the top, the blue and the green section, humans are organized rhythmically inside. They cannot escape from that. We heard about that. We heard about the chronotypes. We heard about inner rhythms. So they have to deal with that. Yeah, here you see this. Humans have to deal with the inner clock. And on the other hand, on the top, we have the artificial systems we are living in. They're global economic systems, societies, economies and markets, business and industries, and work situations and everything. This is temporarily structured. That's what we structure it by time. And humans in the middle, they just struck in the middle like a burger between two buns, and they have to deal with both. They have to deal with the temporarily structured organization on top, and they have to deal with the rhythmically organized biological inside. And that comes to desynchronization. Yeah, and the huger the desynchronization is, the more is the loss that arises out of this. And when you think about a chronocity, you have to think this in the first place. And that's why I always say, don't think in terms of time in the first place, think in terms of rhythms. There's a lot to say about. I just want to bring up this in this screen. Next, third thing is equip stakeholders with know-how. The thing is, when you put together a team, for example, and there's one who has know-how and the other, they don't have know-how around this, there's always a great loss of efficiency. Yeah, when you create a team, someone is talking about time officers here. I always say equip the stakeholders with know-how so that everyone has the same level when they start to implement issues according to a time city. Equip evolution with solid financing. That was one problem. I told you that I had a budget of 10,000 euros a year. This was just experimenting with having nothing. Yeah, so The idea was to start with the solid financing and then starting at the same moment self-sustaining funding from the scratch. So I started with that, but then I stopped in 2016. I stopped with the work together with Bad Kissingen, so we couldn't go on with that. But my recommendation is, my advice is, start self-sustaining funding from the scratch so that you get out of the funding via taxpayer or via the city itself. Try to find solutions for that. There are a lot of possibilities to do so. 5, start with one sector, but always include schools. We heard a lot about schools. Schools are an important sector because there we grow the seed. We had a lot of projects with schools, and the outcome always was that that the kids have been enthusiastic about this theme. And when kids go out and leave school, they bring the knowledge of chronobiology and of the potential of chronobiology into the society, into their work. So we don't have to convince them, we can work with them. And that's why it's important to include schools. And it is, and don't start with the whole city, start with sectors. For example, districts, or better ideas, start with the urban ecosystem. For example, healthcare system, touristic ecosystem, education, economic, it depends on what's your city is standing for. For example, if your city is standing for touristic, just start with the touristic ecosystem. Don't start with the whole city. Start with the nucleus. From there, you can spread everything out. So next thing, 6th thing is look for influencers. This means opinion leaders, everyone. You know, in companies we have opinion leaders. In cities we have opinion leaders. In politics we have opinion leaders. Invite them into the process. We have positive opinion leaders, that means they support you, and you have negative opinion leaders, that means they defend you. Both should be part of the process, otherwise you get problems just in defending to outer positions like these negative influencers. And last but not least, I always hear, oh, we actually deal with smart cities, so we don't have time for a chronocity. It is not smart city versus chronocity. It is, chronocity is, in my view, is an upgrade to a smart city. It is an evolution of a smart city. Let's go back to this picture. When we see a smart city always is dealing with the top, with the blue part, and humans have to deal with the blue part. And a chronocity adds the green part to that. So in the end, it might lead to a smart chronocity. So these are the 7 major recommendations, the major outcomes of my 4.5-year project in Bad Kissingen. And as Mark shows, in the end, we actually work here at the Chronocity project, but we don't integrate the Chronocity project. We try to build it up from the scratch. That's many cities actually are built up for the scratch. They're artificial cities. And this is where I will talk more about this. Here you see some more outcomes of the project in Bad Kissingen. You will find them later. It is we don't have time to go through to that. You will find them later in what you get as a document. So just for you to see, these are more outcomes of Bad Kissingen. Okay. Actually, I was asked why we choose Dominican Republic. And one important issue of the Dominican, even Latin America countries is a word called leapfrogging. Maybe you know something about leapfrogging. Leapfrogging means bypassing outdated development stages and move directly toward more advanced systems. In Europe, we actually have the situation that Europe increasingly invests its resources in maintaining and transforming inherited systems rather than building fundamentally new ones. I talked about this system, smart cities. They all invest in smart cities, but this is not something new. This is something every city is going to do. And it leads to the same problems I just talked about because it's not dealing with the biological rhythms of the people. Latin America, on the other side, represents a unique opportunity to rethink urban development, because they didn't make the same processes within the last 30, 40 years. Yeah, they have old structures, and the chance is to make this leapfrogging step, this huge leapfrogging step, so that they can start with new ideas without the need to deal with older ideas. They only have to deal with old, really old ideas. And that's some completely new way of thinking. Some examples for leapfrogging cities, maybe you know them, is Shenzhen. Shenzhen, for example, made extreme industrial leapfrogging. Tallinn, extreme digital leapfrogging. Songdo, extreme smart city leapfrogging. So our way, because we choose Dominican Republic, is the situation that they are underdeveloped, because this leads to a huge opportunity to develop with a new way of thinking, including biological human rhythms. And that's just a short implementation, a short option to give you some ideas about that, because the other speakers have talked about everything around chronobiology I'm dealing with since 2003. And I hope you get some imagination about this. And if you have further questions, do not hesitate to contact me or just to question me here. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this complete explanation of a very long experience. I know sometimes it's difficult to summarize such interesting topics in these 10 minutes we have.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. Unfortunately, we are a bit late. Some of the questions you put over the chat were already answered by some of the speakers. So what I would do is try to summarize some key ideas I get out of this session, and invite you all to read the agenda and contact any of the speakers for anything that really you want to ask them. So I think that at least for me, it reinforces the idea, this session, that the chronobiology has key impacts both in our health, but also directly to our economy and our ecosystems more largely. So I think that it's very important, as Diego was saying at the beginning, to have the data to back this up and to make this known. And I think that, Michael, also when you were talking about influencers on your talk, right, you were going on that direction. So I think that this is a key issue to take into account. I think that it's clear from all your interventions that there are policies that can be enacted to lessen the impacts, the negative impacts of the current organization of time on our circadian rhythms. And Diego was summarizing 5 specific proposals, but also we heard about how we can apply that to company management, to urban planning, and especially to education. And one of the key points that got out of me hearing you all talking is that education precisely is one of the key levers we can use to really implement the idea of circadian rhythms in practice, in policy. So I would say that probably schools, both in awareness raising and in setting the rhythms of the city, would be like a key actor. And I do think, and there was a couple of questions on that issue as well, that one of the key challenges we find is how we implement, how we deal and find a compromise, I would say, between the need to live by one's own rhythm, and of course the need to synchronize ourselves as society to meet at a certain point to do something together, as Scott so nicely put on their explanation. So I think that this will be a constant challenge, and I link that to the idea of the last idea of Michael that I really liked, the strategic evolution, right? So I think that this is a challenge that we will be facing over and over, and finding different answers in different cities on how we move this research idea into practical policy, and how we evolve our cities to include these 2 very visual parts that Scott was mentioning, the temporal structure of our clocks and our rhythms, our biological rhythms. And I would add here that maybe it was mentioned briefly in some interventions, the rhythms of our larger ecosystem, so our nature and so on. So with that being said, I hope it was a very quick but summary of what has been talked during this session. I invite you all to read the agenda that you will receive in your email in the next days. We will also be able to put up this session into the recording of this session, and from there, for those of you that do not have that may have lost something in translation, you will be able to add subtitles. So hopefully this will also work for the people that were expecting the subtitles during the live session. Thanks a lot for all the speakers again, and for everyone that attended. I hope you found it interesting, and I invite you to follow the network's activities and this conversation that has just started from our point of view. So thank you all.